Risk assessments are useful because, while on many shoots there is a real threat to life or risk of injury, risk assessments are designed to weed out the potential dangers in order to create preemptive countermeasures to minimize the likelihood and danger the risk imposes to human life. They aim to reduce the risk factor by at least 1. Here I talk about the real risk of a light stand or tripod falling over and injuring someone. Some measures to reduce the risk include adjusting the legs properly and placing sandbags at the base of the tripod to improve stability. Because of these measures, the risk factor has been reduced, as you can see on the right. Let's have a look at another real problem. Sometimes risk assessments include danger to equipment. This section covers the safety of equipment while moving through public areas. On our shoot, we had to use public transport, but introduced some measures to reduce the risk to our equipment. These include plain labelless cases, locking equipment away in private property, and keeping one crew member in charge of the equipment at all times. I know health and safety isn't exactly the most glamorous side of filmmaking, but it is a vital part nevertheless. Without it, we wouldn't have the film industry we know today. Now let's take a look at film language. This is primarily what the audience can see and hear. These are mainly artistic and creative decisions rather than technical decisions that we will cover later. For this, let's go to our second film, The Promise. For this shot, we wanted to create a feeling that something was off, as it was supposed to be in a dream scene. I chose to use a wide-angle lens and get close to our subject in order to distort the features upon his face. Normally, you'd want a portrait lens of 50 to 80mm if you wanted an ordinary subject, but I chose 18. I was the DP on the project, and I did a similar technique in the next shot. Here I used a Dutch angle to suggest to the audience that something was off as well. This is because the audience is used to seeing the world and films on a level axis, so it automatically suggests that something is off. Now we look at the often overlooked, but equally important, sound. I have to admit, like many student films, we did rob ourselves of a good sound and sound design in a way, but we still have a few instances where we put sound to good use. On our first film, The Unexpected, I was in charge of editing sound. The soundtrack was already created by a colleague of mine, but I had a part to play in how it was heard in the final piece. I want you to just listen to this clip for a second. We wanted a spooky vibe, so I took the ordinary screeching sound effect that we got from the gate and added some delay and reverb to make it trail off. This not only added to the supernatural feel of the film, but made for an interesting sound transition as well. Another example of this sound problem solving can be found in our fourth film, Inverted. Here we added Foley sound in afterwards in the form of a chain clanging, but instead we used a set of keys. Another seemingly dull but essential part of the filmmaking process is monitoring. Thanks to the digital age, monitoring is now more accessible than ever. Monitoring allows filmmakers to observe the data that they are collecting visually and audibly, either concurrently to recording or soon after. As film students, we use this quite sparingly, but we found the most useful tool we had were histograms. Histograms on the camera allowed us to monitor the light levels within the recording. This is useful because it allows us to correctly set up the camera's exposure as to not lose too much data at the extremes of the whites and blacks. This can save a lot of headaches in post and ensure that footage is never not usable due to errors in exposure. Here we cover everything digital after shooting. For all of our shoots, we edited our videos with Premiere Pro, a professional editor which accepts a diverse range of codecs. We shot on Sony and Blackmagic, so the digital MP4 files were no problem for Premiere. For our fourth film, however, we used a different program alongside Premiere. We used a 3D based application called Blender. For Inverted, we wanted to invert the reflection in a mirror.
To do this, we opted for a subject in front of a green screen for maximum control. The only problem is we had to build everything else in the shot in post. So in Blender, I created a 3D room based on the room we shot in. We took measurements on set so I'd know where the actor would be. After this, I rendered the room shot and merged it with the green screen. I believe this process saved our film. On reflection, I would have gathered more accurate measurements on set, as to make the 3D environment more realistic and less time consuming to make. Production technologies are a set of production techniques that enable the filmmaker to get a clean slate and efficient workflow. This allows for greater creativity with film language. As fairly experienced filmmakers, we all know how to set up a camera properly for a cinematic look. Setting the frame rate to 24, the shutter speed to double the frame rate, and the optimum aperture to ISO ratio for correct exposure. However, we did break this rule once on our last film, Inverted. We changed the shutter speed from 1/50th of a second to 125. We did this because we wanted to reduce the motion blur on our moving actor, so we could cut the subject from the green screen far easier in post. We did not want any blurring, we wanted a clean cut. One element I would change is the use of our clapperboard. Using a clapperboard with the correct setup allows for much easier locating and syncing of sound in post, an element that would greatly increase our production workflow if used. Good.